I wasn't looking for love, but somewhere between the silence and the guilt, he made me feel alive again, even if it cost me everything. I've been married for 8 years. 8 years of shared meals, shared bills, and shared silences. My wife, Amelia, is kind, gentle in her own way, but somewhere along the line, our laughter became routine. Our touches became polite, and I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. I used to tell myself that this was just marriage, that love evolves, that excitement fades, and comfort takes its place. But comfort can be a quiet cage when your heart starts to whisper that something's missing. It started at work, like most things that change your life without warning. A new team member joined us. His name was Ethan. He was confident but calm, the kind of person who listens before he speaks. There was something grounded about him, something real, something that reminded me of who I used to be before life became a series of responsibilities. At first, he was just another colleague. We talked about work, stayed late finishing reports, and sometimes grabbed coffee on the way in. But somewhere between caffeine and conversation, something unspoken started growing. He'd ask questions that no one else did, not about numbers or deadlines, but about me. "Are you happy?" he once asked, out of nowhere. I laughed it off, pretending I didn't understand what he meant. But that night, his words echoed in my mind longer than they should have. There wasn't anything wrong with my marriage. That's why I kept telling myself. No fights, no betrayals, no big reasons to complain. Just a quiet distance, a silence that filled the spaces between what we said and what we didn't. Ethan and I started having lunch together. Then we started talking after work about everything. His childhood, my dreams, the feeling of being stuck in a life that looks perfect on the outside but feels empty inside. He got it. He understood without judgment, and that understanding started to feel like air after years of holding my breath. One evening, we stayed back late again, the office empty, the world outside already dark. He leaned back in his chair and smiled. "You know, you're different when you talk about things you love," he said. I looked at him, trying to understand what he meant. He continued, "When you talk about your old photography hobby, your eyes light up. It's nice to see that side of you." It was such a simple thing to say, but it hit deeper than I expected, because I couldn't remember the last time someone noticed that about me, or cared enough to say it out loud. On the drive home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not about him, exactly, but about how I felt when he said it. Seen, heard, alive. The next few weeks became a blur of excuses. Late meetings, project deadlines, team dinners. Amelia didn't question much. She trusted me. Maybe too much. And that trust felt like both a comfort and a punishment. I wasn't doing anything wrong, not yet. But I was walking a dangerous line, one paved with honesty to everyone but myself. Ethan and I started texting on weekends, little things at first, memes, random thoughts, weekend plans. And then, one night, he sent a message that changed everything. It said, "Sometimes I feel like you understand me more than anyone else." My heart beat faster than it should have. I typed and erased my reply 3 times before writing back. Maybe because I feel the same way. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I'd done something wrong, but because I knew that soon I might. Ethan and I started spending more time together. At first, it was harmless. Lunch breaks, long talks, small jokes, only we understood. But emotional closeness has a way of blurring boundaries long before physical ones ever do. He started showing up in the details of my day. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was him. Every time something funny happened at work, he was the first person I wanted to tell. And when he laughed, that quiet, effortless kind of laugh, I felt a warmth that scared me. One Friday, he asked if I wanted to grab dinner after work. I hesitated. Something inside me whispered that this was the point of no return. But then he smiled and said, "It's just dinner." And I told myself the same lie. The restaurant was small, tucked away from the main street. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He asked me about Amelia, how long we'd been married, what she was like. I told him she was wonderful, kind, steady, loyal. And yet, the moment I said it, my chest tightened. Because deep down, I knew I was describing a woman I was slowly betraying, even if I hadn't yet crossed that final line. After dinner, we stepped outside. The air was cool, and the city lights reflected off the wet pavement. He looked at me for a long moment, not the casual look of a friend, but the kind of look that sees through every wall you've ever built. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure," I replied, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "Why do you always look like you're holding something back?" I didn't have an answer. Because how do you tell someone that your whole life has become a balancing act between duty and desire? That you're living a version of yourself that looks happy but feels half dead inside? I opened my mouth to speak, but stopped. Instead, I said softly, "Maybe I'm just trying not to fall apart." He nodded, and there was something in his eyes, not pity, but understanding. The kind that makes silence feel louder than words. That night, when I got home, Amelia was asleep on the couch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The TV was still on. I stood there for a long time, watching her breathe, feeling this wave of guilt crash over me. She didn't deserve to be the casualty of my confusion. She didn't know that another man's words had found the cracks in my heart she used to fill. I told myself I'd stop seeing Ethan outside of work, that I'd draw the line before it was too late. But life doesn't always honor the promises we make in guilt. A few days later, we ended up at a client event together. Late night, too much wine, too much honesty. We sat outside afterward on the balcony of the hotel, the city quiet beneath us. He looked at me and said softly, "You don't have to hide who you are with me." Something in me broke, because those words, that acceptance, felt like a lifeline I didn't know I'd been waiting for. And before I could stop myself, I said, "I don't even know who I am anymore." He reached over, gently resting his hand on mine. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't bold. Just a touch, steady, human, real. But that small touch felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. Time slowed. The air between us shifted. And in that silence, something in my heart gave in, not to passion, but to peace. The kind that comes from finally being seen. When I finally pulled my hand back, I whispered, "This can't happen." He nodded, his eyes full of something that looked like both sadness and care. "I know," he said quietly, "but I think it already has." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every thought, every heartbeat felt like a confession I hadn't spoken yet. I told myself I'd end it, that I'd distance myself before it went too far. But emotional connections don't disappear because you tell them to. They live in the spaces between your choices, the looks, the silence, the almosts. The following week, we barely spoke. We kept things professional, careful, distant. But every time our eyes met, there was that quiet knowing, that invisible thread neither of us could cut. I wanted to hate him for making me feel this way. I wanted to hate myself more for letting it happen. But the truth is, it wasn't about blame. It was about emptiness. Two people try to fill the spaces life had quietly hollowed out. You can only hide the truth for so long before it starts showing through the cracks. At first, I thought I was managing it, balancing work, home, and the growing silence in my heart. But lies, even the quiet ones, have a way of echoing. Amelia began to notice. Not all at once, but in little ways. The late replies, the distracted looks, the nights I came home smelling like rain and exhaustion instead of her perfume. She never accused me. She just watched, and sometimes I caught that flicker of hurt in her eyes that told me she already knew something was wrong. One night, she asked softly, "Are you happy?" And I froze, because it was the same question Ethan had asked me months ago, and I still didn't know how to answer it. "I'm just tired," I said. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. She nodded, forcing a small smile. "Then rest," she whispered. "You've been running on empty." Her kindness broke me more than anger ever could have, because I was the reason she felt unloved, and she was still trying to understand me instead of blaming me. At work, things grew tense. Ethan and I tried to stay distant. We avoided long talks, avoided being alone. But avoidance has its own gravity. The more you pull away, the stronger the longing becomes. One evening, we were both the last to leave again. It wasn't planned. It never was. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets, looking at the city lights. Without turning, he said, "You've been quiet." "I'm trying to do the right thing," I said. "And what's that?" "To stop feeling what I feel." He sighed softly, turning to face me. "You can't stop feelings. You can only choose what to do with them. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I could bury it all, go back to being the man everyone thought I was. But as I looked at him, the sincerity in his eyes, the quiet care in his voice, I realized that wasn't true. This connection had already changed me. He walked closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to be the reason you lose everything," he said, "but I also can't pretend this doesn't mean something." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. And for a brief moment, I wished the world could stop, right there in that silent understanding between us. But life doesn't freeze for forbidden things. It burns through them until all that's left are ashes. That night, I came home later than usual. Amelia was waiting, her eyes red from tears she didn't bother to hide. "Who is he?" she asked. My heart stopped. She wasn't guessing. She knew. For a long time, I said nothing. Silence was my last defense. But even silence tells the truth when it's heavy enough. Her voice trembled. "I read your messages." She didn't shout. She didn't throw things. She just looked at me, the man she'd trusted, the one she'd built a life with. And her voice broke. I could have forgiven a lot of things, but not lies. I wanted to explain, to tell her that I never meant for it to happen, that it wasn't just about desire. It was about feeling seen again, human again. But how do you justify breaking someone's heart because you wanted to feel alive? Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you." She nodded slowly, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Then why did you?" There was no answer. Because love, real love, shouldn't come at the cost of someone else's pain. She didn't say much after that, just packed a small bag, took her keys, and left for her sister's house. The sound of the door closing that night was the loudest silence I'd ever heard. I sat on the floor for hours, staring at the empty space she left behind. Every corner of that house felt like a memory, one I'd just shattered. The next morning, I called Ethan. He didn't sound surprised. "She knows," I said quietly. There was a long pause. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry." "Don't be," I said. "I made my choices." He wanted to see me, but I couldn't. Not then. Not when everything around me was falling apart. For weeks, I lived in that silence, trying to make sense of what I'd done. Guilt became my shadow, following me everywhere. Even at work, the spark between us had turned into something heavier, something fragile. One day, Ethan walked into my office, closed the door, and said softly, "You don't have to face this alone." I looked at him, the man who had become both my escape and my undoing. And I said, "But maybe I do. Because some mistakes, no matter how human, have to be carried alone. Time has a strange way of softening the sharpest memories. It doesn't erase them, it just dulls the edges enough for you to look at them without bleeding all over again." It's been months since everything fell apart. Amelia moved out for good. The divorce papers came quietly. No drama, no revenge, just two signatures that ended a story we once believed would last forever. I still remember the day I signed them. The pen shook in my hand, not because I didn't want to sign, but because I knew I'd broken something I could never rebuild. She didn't deserve the pain I caused her. No one does. After all, I took some time off work. I needed to step back from the noise, from the guilt, from Ethan. I told him I needed space. Not because I stopped caring, but because I had to find myself again before I could understand what love really meant. He didn't fight it. He just nodded and said, "Then find what makes you whole, not who." And that's how I knew he cared, because real care doesn't cling. It lets go. The weeks that followed were quiet. I went back to my old photography hobby, the one I'd abandoned years ago. At first, it felt strange holding the camera again. But as I started taking pictures of sunsets, strangers, small forgotten corners of the city, I began to notice something I hadn't seen in a long time. Life was still beautiful. Even in loss, there was color. Even in endings, there was light. I started therapy too. For the first time, I spoke out loud about the things I'd buried. The emptiness, the confusion, the loneliness that had led me down a path I wasn't proud of. And through that, I learned something. Sometimes it's not love we're searching for, it's understanding. And when we don't find it within ourselves, we go looking for it in someone else's eyes. Months later, Ethan and I met again. Not planned, just fate doing what it does, reminding us that some people stay connected, even when life takes them in different directions. We met at a cafe near the park. He smiled when he saw me, that same calm warmth in his eyes. We talked, not about the past, not about what could have been, but about how we were now. He told me he was seeing someone kind, someone open, and I was happy for him, truly happy. He asked, "Do you ever regret us?" I thought about it for a long moment before answering. "I regret the lies," I said softly, "but I don't regret the truth we found in each other. You helped me see the parts of myself I was too afraid to face." He nodded, his eyes gentle. "Then maybe that's what it was meant to be. Not forever, just a lesson." When I got home that evening, I looked through my old photos, the ones from before everything changed. I saw pictures of Amelia smiling, of the life we'd built, and I realized something I'd been too ashamed to admit before. I did love her. Maybe I still do, in a way that's more gratitude than romance. She was my beginning, the person who showed me what stability looked like. And Ethan, he was the storm that forced me to rebuild my heart differently. Two kinds of love, one that taught me how to stay, and one that taught me when to leave. Soft piano tone, narration slows, emotional resolution. Now, when I talk about love, I don't talk about forever anymore. I talk about honesty, about showing up as your real self, even when it's messy. Because lies, even small ones, destroy the quiet trust that love needs to survive. If I've learned anything, it's this. Love that costs someone their peace is never love at all. And the greatest act of love isn't holding on. It's knowing when to let go before you destroy something good. Sometimes I still think about that night, the moment everything changed. How one small connection can rewrite your whole life. But I don't see it with regret anymore. I see it as a reminder that we're all human, flawed, searching, and that redemption doesn't come from forgetting your mistakes. It comes from facing them with open eyes and a kinder heart. So now, when people ask if I go back and change anything, I tell them this. No, because even though I lost what I thought was everything, I found something I never had before. Myself.